Rich man was about to give everything to his son, but the janitor whispered a secret that made him tremble. Robert William Anderson was preparing to sign the most important documents of his life when he felt a presence beside him. His hands trembled over the mahogany desk as the golden pen slipped between his sweaty fingers. That was when John Miller, the janitor who had worked in his mansion for only 3 months, quietly approached and whispered words that shattered the businessman's world. The man who had built a real estate empire in New York City froze upon hearing a name he hadn't heard in 40 years. "Dr. Robert, do you remember Mary Helen Cooper?" John murmured, keeping his voice low so that Tyler, the businessman's 35-year-old son, wouldn't hear. The last name struck Robert William like lightning. Mary Helen had been his first wife, the one who left pregnant in 1983 after discovering his affair with his current wife. For decades, he had convinced himself that she and the child had disappeared forever. Who are you?" Robert William managed to stammer, his hands still shaking over the asset transfer papers. "I'm John Cooper Miller, Mary Helen's brother, and I've come to seek justice for my nephew," the janitor replied, revealing an identity he had kept secret since getting the job at the mansion. Tyler watched the scene without understanding, eager to finally receive the early inheritance his father had promised. At 35, he had always lived in luxury, waiting only for the moment to officially take control of the family business. "Dad, what's going on? Let's just sign these papers already," Tyler said impatiently, adjusting the gold watch on his wrist. Robert William asked to speak privately, but John insisted on staying. The businessman tried to keep his composure, but his voice trembled as he spoke. "Tyler, I need to talk to you about things from the past that you don't know." "What things?" Tyler asked, a hint of irritation in his voice. "Dad, you promised I'd get everything today. I've waited long enough." John then revealed the first of many secrets he had kept for years. "Your father had another son before you, Tyler, a boy born in 1983, one he abandoned along with his mother." The silence that followed was broken only by the ticking of the antique clock in the corner of the room. Tyler felt as if the ground had opened beneath his feet. "That's not true," Tyler stammered, looking at his father for a denial that never came. Robert William lowered his head, defeated. For 40 years, he had buried that truth so deep, he had almost convinced himself it didn't exist. "It's true, son. Mary Helen was pregnant when she found out about my relationship with your mother." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. The revelation hit Tyler like a punch to the gut. His whole life he had believed he was special, the sole heir to the empire his father built. Now he discovered he was only the second son, the one who stayed while the first was sent away. "Where is he now?" Tyler asked, his voice weaker than usual. John smiled for the first time since entering the room. This was the moment he had waited decades for. "Your brother's name is Mark Cooper Anderson, and he's a doctor at Greenwich Community Hospital." Robert William jerked his head up sharply. Greenwich Village was where Mary Helen had grown up, where her parents lived when he met her in college. It made perfect sense that she would have returned there. "A doctor?" Robert William repeated, a mix of pride and remorse in his voice. "That's right, graduated from Columbia University, specialized in cardiac surgery. He's worked at the same hospital for 15 years, saving lives of people who can't afford private treatment," John said with evident pride. Tyler felt a pang of something he couldn't quite identify. Envy, admiration, fear that this unknown brother might be better than him. "How do you know all this?" Tyler asked. "Because I helped raise the boy after Mary Helen left," John replied, his words heavy with emotion. "When my sister came home pregnant to our parents' house, I was still young, only 20, but I promised her I'd take care of the boy." Robert William Anderson closed his eyes, trying to process everything. For 40 years, he'd imagined Mary Helen had rebuilt her life far from New York City, perhaps in another state. He never thought she'd stayed so close. Mary Helen, how is she?" he asked hesitantly. John's face darkened. My sister passed away 5 years ago, cancer, but before she left, she made me promise one thing. What? Robert and Tyler asked almost simultaneously. That I'd come to you, Robert, and tell the truth. That Mark would know who his real father was before it was too late. The tension in the room was palpable. Tyler looked at his father, then at John, trying to understand how his life had completely changed in just a few minutes. Why now? Robert asked. Why after all these years? John pulled a yellowed, carefully folded letter from his uniform pocket. Because today is Mark's 40th birthday, and because Mary Helen wrote this letter to you in 1983, but never had the courage to send it. Robert's hands trembled as he took the letter. The paper was yellowed with age, but Mary Helen's delicate handwriting remained intact. Robert, when you read this letter, our son will have already been born. I chose to name him Mark, after your grandfather whom you love so much. I'm not writing to ask for anything, only so you know he exists, and that one day perhaps you might want to meet him. He's not to blame for our mistakes. With love, Mary Helen. Tears streamed down the businessman's face for the first time in decades. Tyler watched the scene, feeling as if he were watching a movie about someone else's life. Dad, you need to go after him, Tyler said, surprising even himself with those words. Robert looked at his son, amazed by the reaction. Are you sure? This changes everything, Tyler. If Mark is my son, he has a right to the inheritance too. Tyler took a few seconds to respond. He'd been raised his whole life to be the sole heir, but something in his heart told him it was time to do the right thing. He's my brother, he finally said. I want to meet him. John watched the conversation intently. He'd planned this moment for months, ever since he'd gotten the job at the Anderson mansion through an outsourced cleaning company. It was no coincidence. He'd researched, planned, and waited for the right opportunity. But there's one thing you both should know, John continued. Mark doesn't know Robert is his father. Mary Helen never told him. She only said his father had abandoned them before he was born. This revelation added another layer of complexity to the situation. How do you approach a son who doesn't know you exist and likely resents the absent father? Does he have a family? Robert asked. Married to Jennifer, a nurse at the same hospital. They have 2 kids, Emily Grace, who's 12, and Ethan, 8. A simple but close-knit family. Robert tried to imagine meeting not just a lost son, but grandchildren he never knew existed. Tyler thought about what it would be like to have nephews the same age he'd been when he played with remote control cars. John, why didn't you tell Mark first? Tyler asked. Because I know my nephew. He's as proud as his mother. If he knew his father was a millionaire, he'd never accept any approach. He'd think it was about the money. John's strategy was smart. He knew he had to convince Robert William first to reach out to his son before revealing the truth to Mark. So, how do we do this? Asked Robert William. Start by going to the hospital where he works. But not as a millionaire businessman, go as a regular patient. Get to know the man your son has become before revealing who you are. The idea seemed both simple and terrifying. Robert William, used to controlling everything in his life, would have to put himself in a vulnerable position. What if he rejects me when he learns the truth? The businessman's voice was barely audible. That's the risk you'll have to take, replied John. But I can guarantee one thing, Mark is a good man, fair. If you're honest with him, at least he'll listen. Tyler, who had stayed quiet during the last part of the conversation, finally spoke. I'll go with you, Dad. Robert William looked at his son, surprised. Are you sure? If I'm going to have a brother, I want to meet him too. And maybe it'll be easier for him to accept if he knows you have other children, that you're not trying to replace anyone. John nodded, approving the decision. Tomorrow is Thursday. Mark does surgeries in the morning and sees patients in the clinic in the afternoon. You can show up around 2 o'clock. Robert William looked again at the asset transfer papers on his desk. What had seemed so important an hour ago now felt trivial. John, can I ask you something? Of course. How did you get this job here? I mean, was it really a coincidence? John smiled, but this time there was a hint of satisfaction in his smile. It wasn't a coincidence. 2 years ago, when Helen Anderson was hospitalized, she asked me to find you. It took me months to figure out where you lived, how to get access. The cleaning company I hired was the only one that served this neighborhood. Did you lie on your resume? Asked Tyler. I didn't lie about my qualifications. I worked 20 years as a janitor in various places. I just omitted my connection to your family. Robert William had to admire the man's determination. John had planned everything meticulously, waiting for the right moment to reveal the truth. Why did you choose today? Asked Robert William. Because today is Mark's birthday, like I said, and because I found out you were planning to transfer all your assets to Tyler. I thought it was time you knew there's another heir. The afternoon passed quickly as John shared more details about Mark's life, how he had dedicated himself to his studies, how he worked from a young age to help support the family, how he met Jennifer in medical school, and how they were happy despite financial struggles. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. When it grew dark, John prepared to leave, but first handed Robert William a photo. This is his family, he said, showing a picture of Mark with Jennifer and their 2 children in front of the hospital. Robert William studied the face of the son he'd never known. Mark had his eyes, but the smile was Helen Anderson's. The children looked happy, hugging their parents. He seems fulfilled, murmured Robert William. He is a fulfilled man, but also tired. A public sector doctor's salary isn't much, and Jennifer had to stop working when Ethan was born with some health issues. What kind of issues? Tyler asked, concerned about the nephew he hadn't met yet. Nothing serious, but Ethan was born with a heart murmur. He needed surgery as a baby and still requires regular medical checkups. Private insurance would be too expensive for them. Robert William Anderson felt a pang of guilt. While Tyler grew up with the best private doctors at his disposal, his other son struggled to provide health care for his own child. John, tomorrow when we go to the hospital, will you be there? I'll be working here as usual, but you'll have to do this alone. If Mark sees me with you, he might suspect something. That night, Robert barely slept. For the first time in 40 years, he was forced to relive his past choices. He remembered meeting Mary Helen Cooper in business school, how they fell in love, how they married too young. He also recalled the pressure he felt back then. The family business was struggling, and meeting Helen Anderson, the daughter of a successful businessman, seemed like an opportunity to save it through a strategic marriage. What began as interest turned into real love for Helen, but Mary Helen discovered the betrayal just months after their wedding. The fight they had was terrible, with accusations and tears that still echoed in his memory. You never truly loved me. Those were the last words Mary Helen spoke before leaving. To you, I was just a means to get what you wanted. At the time, Robert was convinced she was exaggerating, that she'd come back once she calmed down. He never imagined she was pregnant, much less that she'd carry the pregnancy to term alone. Tyler also spent the night awake, trying to picture what it would be like to have a brother. He'd always been an only child, used to having his parents' undivided attention. The idea of sharing not just their affection but also the inheritance was both frightening and exciting. He thought of all the special moments he'd shared with his father, trips, graduations, birthdays, and wondered if Mark ever missed having a father present for the important milestones in his life. The next morning, Robert woke up with a decision made. He wouldn't go to the hospital as a millionaire businessman. He'd wear simple clothes and try to get to know Mark as a person, not as a father. Tyler suggested they take his everyday car, not the limousine they usually used. They wanted to go unnoticed, at least for this first meeting. Greenwich Community Hospital was very different from the private hospitals the Anderson family was used to. The walls needed paint, lines of people waited for care, and the smell of disinfectant mixed with cheap coffee filled the halls. We're looking for Dr. Mark Cooper, Tyler said at the reception. He's in the cardiology clinic, 3rd floor, but there are many patients ahead of you, the receptionist replied without even looking up from her papers. On the 3rd floor, father and son found a crowded waiting room. Ordinary people, some clearly facing financial struggles, waited patiently to be seen. Can we schedule an appointment? Robert asked a nurse. Only for emergencies today. The next available slot is in 3 weeks. Robert was used to getting any medical appointment immediately. Just a phone call to the private hospital was enough. Here he learned what the public healthcare system really meant. "Can we wait? Maybe someone won't show up," Tyler suggested. The nurse looked at them curiously. They weren't the usual type of patient at that hospital. "You can wait, but it'll take a while." They sat in the waiting room and began observing. An elderly woman clutched old test results in her trembling hands. A young man carried a child who coughed constantly. A pregnant woman tried to get comfortable in an unforgiving plastic chair. After an hour of waiting, the office doors opened and Mark appeared. Robert William Anderson felt the air leave his lungs when he saw his son in person for the first time. Mark had his green eyes, but his mouth was identical to Mary Helen Cooper's. He wore a simple white lab coat, his dark hair slightly tousled, and there was a gentle weariness in his expression. "Mrs. Connie, you may come in," Mark called, helping the elderly woman to her feet. His voice was calm, patient, even clearly overworked. He treated each patient with care and attention. Tyler nudged his father with his elbow. "That's him," he whispered. For the next 2 hours, father and son watched Mark work. He attended to each patient without rushing, explained diagnoses in simple terms, and reassured the most anxious ones. It was easy to see why John was so proud of his nephew. When it was finally their turn, Robert William felt his heart race. "How can I help you?" Mark asked, gesturing to the chairs in front of his desk. The office was small and simple, but well organized. On the wall hung diplomas and certificates, along with a family photo John had shown them the day before. "Doctor, We'd like to get a cardiac checkup," Robert Williams said, his voice slightly unsteady. Mark studied the two men carefully. There was something about them that didn't fit the usual profile of his patients. "Do you have any specific symptoms? Chest pain? Shortness of breath?" "No, just prevention," Tyler answered quickly. "I see. I'll take a basic medical history from you." Over the next few minutes, Mark asked routine questions about medical background, lifestyle habits, and family history. Robert William answered mechanically, more interested in studying every expression on his son's face. "Your last name is Anderson," Mark noted, writing on the chart. "Are you related?" "Father and son," Tyler replied. "And what do you do for work?" Robert William hesitated. He didn't want to lie, but he couldn't reveal the truth yet. "Real estate," he finally said. Mark nodded, showing little interest. He was used to not prying into patients' personal lives. "I'll perform an electrocardiogram on both of you and order some tests. Results will be ready in a week." As he prepared the equipment, Mark made small talk. "Do you live in the area?" "Downtown," Robert William answered. "And you, doctor? Are you from Greenwich Village?" "Born and raised here. My mother always said I should come back to help the community where I grew up." The mention of his mother made Robert Williams' heart ache. "Does your mother still live here?" A shadow of sadness crossed Mark's face. "She passed 5 years ago. Cancer." "I'm so sorry," Robert Williams said, and he truly meant it. "Thank you. She was a strong woman, raised me alone and taught me values I carry to this day." Tyler and his father exchanged glances. Mark spoke of Helen Anderson with such love and admiration that it was impossible not to be moved. "What did she do for work?" Tyler asked. "She was an elementary school teacher. After I was born, she tutored from home to support us. My Uncle John helped a lot too." "John?" "My uncle, practically a second father to me, worked his whole life to help me through school. Now he works as, does odd jobs to support his own family." Robert William felt a pang of guilt, thinking of John cleaning his mansion while they spoke about him. Both electrocardiograms came back normal, as expected. Mark prescribed some routine tests and scheduled a follow-up for the next week. "Doctor," Robert Williams said as they were leaving, "may I ask you a personal question?" Mark hesitated but nodded. "Have you ever wondered about your father?" The question caught Mark off guard. He looked at Robert William Anderson carefully, as if trying to understand the motivation behind the question. "Why do you want to know?" Medical curiosity, Robert lied. For the family history. Mark took a deep breath before answering. My mother told me my father left us before I was born, that he was a man who couldn't take responsibility. For a long time I hated him, but then I learned that some people just aren't ready to be parents. The words hit Robert like knives. That was how his son saw him, as an irresponsible man who abandoned his family. And today, do you still feel angry? Mark thought for a few seconds. Today I feel sorry for him. He missed the chance to know an amazing woman and to have a son. The loss was his, not ours. When they left the office, Robert was visibly shaken. Tyler walked him to the car in silence. Dad, did you hear what he said? That the loss was his father's, not his. I heard. He seems to have made peace with my absence. That's good. It means he's not a resentful person. Maybe this will be easier than we thought. Robert wasn't so sure. Mark had built a solid life without him. He had a happy family, a respectable career, strong moral principles. Why would he want a millionaire father showing up now? On the way home, they stopped at a cafe near the hospital to talk. What did you think of him? Robert asked. He's impressive. Did you see how he treated his patients? With so much care, even though he was clearly overworked. I did. And did you see where he works? That hospital needs renovations, new equipment. Dad, don't think about that now. First, we have to tell him the truth. Then we'll figure out how to help. Robert knew his son was right, but he couldn't stop thinking about everything he could do to improve Mark's life and his family's. When they got home, they found John finishing cleaning the room where everything had begun the day before. So, how did it go? John asked eagerly. He's an impressive man, Robert said. You and Mary Helen did an amazing job. John smiled proudly. And now are you going to tell him the truth? Next week when we go back for the test results. But John, I need to ask you something. Are you absolutely certain Mark is my son? John went to the cabinet where he kept his belongings and pulled out an old folder. From it, he took out Mark's birth certificate. The birth date matches the time Mary Helen was pregnant. And there's more, she kept this. John showed a DNA test Mark had taken years earlier to check compatibility as a bone marrow donor for a patient. How did you get this? Tyler asked. Mark asked me to take it to the lab. He was willing to donate marrow to a child in need. Unfortunately, he wasn't a match, but I kept a copy of the test. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing, Robert studied the document. If necessary, he could do a paternity test, but deep down he knew he didn't need to. Mark had his eyes, his mannerisms, even the way he tilted his head when thinking. John, can I ask you a difficult question? Of course. Do you hate me for what I did to your sister? John took his time answering, choosing his words carefully. For a long time, yes. I hated you for hurting Mary Helen, for leaving us to struggle alone. But my sister taught me that hatred only hurts the one who feels it. And now seeing how Mark became a good man despite everything, I think maybe things happened the way they were supposed to. How so? If you had stayed with Mary Helen out of obligation because of the pregnancy, maybe Mark would have grown up in a house full of resentment. This way, he grew up with only love. John's reflection was profound and touched Robert William. Perhaps his absence, as painful as it had truly been better for everyone. But now it's different, John continued. Mark is an adult. He has judgment. He can choose whether or not he wants a relationship with his father. Tyler, who had listened to the whole conversation, asked a question that had been bothering him. John, what if Mark doesn't want to know us? What if he thinks we're showing up out of interest now that he's graduated and successful? That's a risk you'll have to take. But I can tell you one thing. Mark is fair. If you're honest with him, at least he'll listen. For the rest of the week, Robert William couldn't focus on business. His mind kept drifting to the son he had just met. He discreetly researched Greenwich Community Hospital and discovered the place really needed investments in equipment and renovations. Tyler, meanwhile, started looking up Mark online. He found a few local newspaper articles mentioning successful surgeries he had performed, always in the context of saving lives for underprivileged patients. One article in particular caught his attention. Mark had operated on a child for free, parents who couldn't afford a heart surgery. The operation had been done over a weekend, and Mark refused any payment. "Dad, you need to read this," Tyler said, showing him the article. Robert William read the text with growing emotion. The son he had abandoned had become exactly the kind of man he wished he could be. "You know what impresses me the most," Tyler said. "He could work at private hospitals, make a lot more money, but he chose to stay in public service to help those in need." "The opposite of me," Robert William murmured. "I've always pursued profit above all else. Dad, it's not too late to change. Maybe Mark can teach us a few things." The week passed slowly. Robert William was tempted several times to go back to the hospital before the scheduled date, just to see Mark working. He resisted the urge because he knew it would be intrusive. On Friday, he received an unexpected call. "Mr. Anderson, this is Jennifer, Dr. Mark's wife. Were you at his office this week?" Robert Williams' heart raced. "Yes, I was. Why?" "It's just that my husband got curious about you. He said you asked very specific questions about his family. He doesn't usually get that kind of interest from patients." Robert William didn't know how to respond. Had Mark suspected something? "We just made conversation during the appointment." "Could you give me your full name? Mark asked me to check if your test results came in, but we couldn't find you in the system." Robert William realized there was a problem. They had used their real names, but they probably weren't in the system because they weren't actual public healthcare patients. "Could you tell the doctor we'll be there Monday to get the results as agreed? Of course, he'll be expecting you." When he hung up, Robert William knew he'd have to reveal the truth sooner than planned. Mark was suspicious, and lying further would backfire. Over the weekend, Robert William made an important decision. Instead of going back to the hospital on Monday, he would visit Mark at home on Sunday evening. It would be more intimate, more personal. John provided the address, a small apartment in a modest building in Greenwich Village. At 7 on Sunday night, Robert William and Tyler parked in front of the building. "Dad, are you sure you want to do this here?" Tyler asked. "If I'm going to tell the truth, let it be in his space, where he feels safe." They went up to the 3rd floor and rang the bell. Mark opened the door wearing casual clothes, clearly surprised to see them. "Mr. Anderson, did something happen with the test results?" "Dr. Mark, can we talk? It's about something very important." Mark hesitated but invited them in. The apartment was small but cozy. Jennifer was in the kitchen preparing dinner, and the children were watching TV in the living room. "Jennifer, these are the patients I mentioned," Mark said. Jennifer greeted them politely, but curiosity flickered in her eyes. "Doctor, actually, we're not your patients," Robert William began. "We lied about that, and I apologize." The mood in the room shifted instantly. Mark grew alert, protective. "Then who are you and what do you want?" Robert William took a deep breath. It was time for the truth. "My name is Robert William Anderson, and I'm your father." The silence that followed was deafening. Jennifer dropped a plate in the kitchen. The children stopped paying attention to the TV. Mark turned pale. "What did you say?" "I'm your father, Mark. The man who abandoned you and your mother 40 years ago." Mark stood abruptly. "Is this some kind of sick joke?" "It's not a joke. Your Uncle John works at my house. He's the one who told me about you." "Uncle John?" Mark looked even more confused. "What does Uncle John have to do with this?" Tyler stepped in. "Dr. Mark, I'm Tyler, your brother." "I know it's hard to believe, but it's true." Jennifer moved closer to her husband, clearly worried. "Mark, are you okay?" Mark sat back down, running his hands through his hair. "I don't understand. How did you find me? What do you want from me?" "We don't want anything," Robert Williams said. "We just want to know you, to know my grandchildren." "Your grandchildren?" Mark let out a humorless laugh. "You left my mother when she was pregnant, and now, 40 years later, you show up talking about grandchildren." Emily, Grace, and Ethan, the children, approached curiously. "Daddy, who are these men?" Emily Grace asked. Mark looked at his kids, then at Robert William. clearly torn about how to explain. Kids, go to your room. Daddy and Mommy need to talk with these people. But Dad, please, go. Once the children left, Mark turned to Robert William, his eyes burning with anger. 40 years. You had 40 years to show up. My mother raised me alone, worked 2 jobs, struggled, and now you come here. Mark, I know you have every right to be angry. Angry, Mark cut in. I'm not angry, I'm disgusted. The words hit Robert William like punches. Do you know what my mother went through? Do you know how hard it was for her to explain to a 5-year-old why Daddy never came to visit? Jennifer tried to calm her husband. Mark, breathe. No, Jennifer. This man had 40 years to show up, and he does it now. When? When I don't need him for anything. Tyler tried to mediate. Mark, our father only found out where you were a week ago. Your Uncle John... My Uncle John did what? Mark grabbed his phone. I'm calling him right now. You don't need to call, a voice said from the doorway. Everyone turned. John stood at the apartment entrance holding a key Mark had given him years ago. Uncle John, Mark stood. What's going on here? John walked in, looking weary. I asked them to come. It's time you knew the whole truth, Mark. What truth? I know the truth. My father left before I was born. That's not quite how it happened, John said, sitting down. Your mother never told Robert William she was pregnant. Mark stared at his uncle in disbelief. What do you mean? Helen Anderson found out about Robert Williams' affair with another woman. She was 3 months pregnant, but she didn't tell him. She simply packed her bags and left. That doesn't change anything, Mark protested. He betrayed my mother. It does change things, John insisted, because he didn't know you existed. For 40 years, he believed your mother had vanished into the world. Jennifer, who had stayed quiet until then, asked a question. John, why did you never tell Mark this? Because Mary Helen made me promise not to while she was alive. She said Mark should grow up expecting nothing from his father. Mark sat down again, trying to process all the information. So, he really didn't know about me? He didn't, Robert William confirmed. If he had, he would never have let you and your mother struggle. Struggle? Mark laughed bitterly. We didn't struggle. We had a happy life. Poor, but happy. I know, said Robert William, and I'm not here to say I could have done better than your mother and John. I want the chance to know the man my son has become. Mark stayed silent for several minutes. Jennifer held his hand, offering support. What do you want from me? He finally asked. Nothing you don't want to give, just the opportunity to talk, to get to know each other. And him? Mark pointed at Tyler. Where does he fit into this story? Tyler stepped closer. I'm your younger brother, Dad's son, with his second wife. Until last week, I didn't know you existed. Second marriage? Mark looked at Robert William. You married the woman you cheated on my mother with? Yes. Robert William lowered his head. I know how that sounds. It sounds like you planned it all. You betrayed my mother, she left, and you stayed with the replacement. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that, Mark interrupted. You destroyed an innocent woman's life to be with someone else. John decided to step in again. Mark, your mother wasn't innocent in all this. Everyone looked at John in surprise. What do you mean, Uncle? Mary Helen knew from the beginning that Robert William was being pressured by his parents to marry Helen Anderson. She knew he was torn between her and the family business. And why didn't she tell me that? Because your mother was proud. She'd rather leave than fight for a man who was unsure. Robert William looked at John with gratitude. The man was trying to soften his guilt, even though he had every reason to hate him. That doesn't justify the betrayal, said Mark. It doesn't, Robert William agreed. I made the wrong choice. I chose money over love. And I spent 40 years paying for that choice. What do you mean paying? My marriage to Helen was never happy. We married out of convenience, stayed married out of habit. We had Tyler, and he was the only good thing to come from that union. Tyler looked at his father, surprised by the confession. Dad, you're not happy? We're functional, Your mother has her social life, I have my business. We don't fight, but there's no real love between us. Jennifer asked a practical question. What do you expect to happen now that Mark just accepts you into his life? We don't expect anything, said Tyler. We just want the chance to know our family. Family, Mark laughed. Family is who was here when I needed them. My mother, my Uncle John, my wife, my kids. You're just people who share my DNA. The words were harsh, but Robert William knew they were fair. You're right, he said. But DNA also means something. It means Emily, Grace, and Ethan are my grandchildren. It means Tyler is your brother. Mark looked at Jennifer, seeking guidance. She knew him well enough to see he was fighting an internal battle. Mark, Jennifer said softly, maybe you should give them a chance. Why? Because you've always wondered what it would be like to have a father, and because children deserve to know their grandfather and uncle. What if they're only here out of self-interest? You saw their clothes, the car they arrived in. They have money. John decided to clarify this point. Mark, I've been working in their home for 3 months. Robert William Anderson is a millionaire, owner of one of the largest real estate companies in New York City. The impact of the revelation was visible on Mark's face. A millionaire. Very much a millionaire, John confirmed. Mark stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street. So that's it. 40 years later, my millionaire father shows up in my life, and I'm supposed to be happy. You should be curious, said Tyler. At least to find out what kind of person he is now. I already know what kind of person he is, the kind who abandons a pregnant woman and then lives in luxury while she struggles. Robert William Anderson approached the window. Mark, may I tell you something that might change your perspective? Go ahead. All these years, I searched for your mother. I hired private investigators, placed ads in newspapers, tried everything. I never could find her. Why were you looking? Because after she left, I realized I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. Helen Anderson gave me financial stability, but Mary Helen Cooper was my true love. Mark turned to look at his father. If she was your true love, why did you betray her? Because I was young, ambitious, and stupid. I thought I could have both worlds, love and money. By the time I realized I was losing Mary Helen, it was too late. And now, what's changed? Now I understand that money without family is worthless. I built an empire, but I have no one to share the victories with. Tyler is a good son, but our relationship has always been formal. I didn't know how to be a father to him either. Tyler seemed hurt by the remark. Dad, you've always been a good father to me. I was a provider, not a father. I paid for the best schools, the best trips, but I wasn't there for the important moments. Mark watched the dynamic between father and son with interest. And you, Tyler, what do you hope to gain by meeting your poor brother? The question was direct and a little cruel. Tyler took his time answering. I hope to learn how to be a better person. My whole life, I've had everything I wanted, but seeing you working at the hospital, helping people, I realized my life has no purpose. Working at the hospital isn't glamorous, said Mark. It's exhausting, poorly paid, sometimes frustrating. But it's important. You save lives. I just manage businesses that make rich people richer. Jennifer, who had observed the entire conversation, decided to intervene. Mark, they came here with a genuine attempt to connect. Maybe you should give them a chance. A chance how? They want me to come to their mansion for dinner every Sunday. They want you to let them meet Emily, Grace, and Ethan, said John. The children are innocent in all this. The remark struck Mark. He had always wanted his children to have what he never did, a big, close-knit family. What if I let you meet the kids and then you disappear from their lives? How do I explain that to them? We won't disappear, Robert promised. If you give us a chance, we'll be here for whatever you need. Whatever we need, Mark repeated. And what do you think we need? Robert hesitated. He knew any mention of financial help would be misinterpreted. You need a grandfather and an uncle who love Emily, Grace, and Ethan unconditionally. The answer was clever, focusing on emotion rather than material things. Mark sat back down, clearly exhausted by the situation. I need time to think. How much time? Asked Tyler. I don't know, this just turned my whole life upside down. 40 years believing one version of the story, and now I discover things weren't quite like that. John stood up, signaling it was time to leave. Mark, I'm going home, but I want you to know one thing. Your mother always said you were just like your father, stubborn, proud, but fair. If she was right, you'll make the right decision. After John left, Robert William and Tyler also prepared to go. Dr. Mark, Robert William said at the door, whatever you decide, I want you to know I'm very proud of the man you've become. You have no right to feel proud. You weren't part of my upbringing. You're right, but I still do. After everyone had left, Mark and Jennifer were alone in the room. The children had fallen asleep during the tense conversation. What do you think? Mark asked. I think they seem sincere. And I think Emily, Grace, and Ethan deserve to know their grandfather. What if it's all a lie? What if they're here for some hidden motive we can't see? Then we'll find out and cut them off. But what if it's true? What if they really want to be part of our family? Mark stayed awake all night, thinking about everything that had happened. He remembered how he'd always dreamed of meeting his father as a child. He imagined what it would be like to have a man to teach him soccer, to talk about guy things. But he also remembered all the times he'd missed having a father figure during important moments: graduation, his wedding, the births of his children. On Monday, Mark struggled to focus at work. His colleagues noticed he was distant, but he didn't want to explain what was going on. During lunch, he called John. Uncle, I need to know the truth. Do you really believe they're sincere? I do, Mark. I saw Robert William cry when he read your mother's letter. I saw Tyler fighting his own prejudice to accept having a poor brother. They're not perfect, but they're sincere. And you? How do you feel working for the man who hurt your sister? John took a while to answer. At first, I was angry. But then I realized he also suffered because of the choices he made. 40 years is a long time to carry guilt. Do you think I should give them a chance? I think you should give yourself a chance. The chance to have a father and a brother. On Tuesday, Mark made a decision. He called his office and asked his secretary to find Robert William Anderson's number. Robert William? It's Mark. Mark, how are you? Confused, but okay. I wanted to propose something. I'm listening. How about we have lunch together tomorrow? Just the two of us. I want to talk without pressure, without an audience. That would be great. Where would you like to meet? I know a simple restaurant near the hospital. Nothing fancy, just good food and a quiet place to talk. Perfect. Send me the address. On Wednesday, father and son met at the small restaurant Mark had chosen. It was a place frequented by doctors, nurses, and hospital staff, ordinary people who wanted an affordable, tasty meal. Robert William felt out of place but tried to hide it. He ordered the simplest dish on the menu and waited for Mark to set the tone. Why do you really want to know me? Mark asked directly. Because I found out I have an incredible son and I don't want to waste any more time away from him. But you have Tyler. Why do you need another son? Robert William thought carefully before answering. Because Tyler grew up with me, but he doesn't really know me. Our relationship was always based on money. I gave him everything he wanted and he respected me for it. But we don't have real closeness. And you think it'd be different with me? I don't know, but I'd like to try. Mark stirred his food for a few minutes before speaking again. You know I don't need your money, right? I do. And that's one of the things that impresses me most about you. Why? Because it means any relationship we have will be based on real affection, not self-interest. What if I say I don't want your money for my children either, that I'd rather they grow up with simple values like I did? Robert William Anderson swallowed hard. The idea of not being able to help his grandchildren financially was hard to accept. I'd respect your decision, but I can say money doesn't automatically corrupt. Tyler grew up wealthy, but he's a good kid. Tyler grew up spoiled, Mark corrected. He even admitted his life has no purpose. Maybe you could help him find one. Me? You could teach him what it means to work for something bigger than himself. Mark smiled for the first time in the conversation. You want me to mentor my rich brother? I want you to get to know each other as brothers. The rest will come naturally." For the rest of lunch, they talked about lighter topics. Robert William Anderson spoke about his business, his travels, his hobbies. Mark talked about medicine, interesting cases, and the challenges of the public healthcare system. "Dad," Mark said at the end, using the word for the first time, "I want to try." "Try what?" "To have a relationship with you, but with conditions." "What conditions?" "First, no money. Not for me, not for Jennifer, not for the kids, at least not for now." "All right. Second, you'll meet my children gradually. I won't throw them into a situation they don't understand." "I agree." "Third, Tyler will also meet the kids gradually, but he needs to prove he's not just some irresponsible rich playboy." "How can he prove that?" "By working, doing something useful with his life." Robert William Anderson smiled. "You want Tyler to work? I want Tyler to understand what it means to earn things. You may have money, but my kids will learn values by example." "And the fourth condition?" "There isn't one. These three are enough to start." When they left the restaurant, Robert William Anderson felt a lightness he hadn't known in years. For the first time in a long while, he had hope of building a real family. That night, he called Tyler and told him about the lunch. "He said I need to work?" Tyler asked, indignant. "He said you need to prove you're not just a rich playboy." "But I do work. I manage part of the company." "Managing family businesses isn't the same as building something yourself or helping others." Tyler was silent for a few minutes. "What do you think I should do?" "I don't know. How about we ask Mark?" "Ask him? He knows the world of real work. Maybe he can suggest something." The next day, Tyler called Mark directly. "Mark, it's Tyler. Can we talk?" "Sure. About what?" "About this whole 'I need to work' thing." "What did you mean by that?" Mark laughed on the other end. "I meant, you need to do something that matters beyond making money." "Like what?" "I don't know. What do you enjoy?" Tyler thought for a few minutes. "I like sports, cars, traveling. Nothing that helps other people." "Never thought about it." "Then it's time to start. How about coming to the hospital tomorrow, not as a visitor, as a volunteer?" "A volunteer?" "We have a volunteer program. People who help entertain the kids in the wards, talk to lonely seniors, assist the medical staff with simple tasks." "I don't know anything about medicine." "You don't need to. You just need to want to help." Tyler hesitated. He'd never done volunteer work in his life. "What if I'm bad at it?" "Then you learn. Like anything else in life." "All right, so I'll try." On Friday, Tyler showed up at Greenwich Community Hospital wearing simple clothes and eager to learn. Mark introduced him to the volunteer program coordinator, Mrs. Johnson, a 60-year-old woman who had been overseeing the activities for over a decade. "So you're Dr. Mark's brother?" Mrs. Johnson asked, looking Tyler up and down. "I am, and I'd like to help here." "Do you have experience with children? With the elderly? With sick people?" "I don't have experience with any of that," Tyler admitted, "but I'm willing to learn." Mrs. Johnson smiled. There was something about the young man's honesty that pleased her. "All right, we'll start slow. Today you'll help distribute meals to the patients on the 4th floor." Over the next 4 hours, Tyler discovered a whole new world. He talked to patients who had no visitors, helped an elderly woman eat because she couldn't hold the spoon on her own, and played with a child who had been hospitalized for 2 weeks. By the end, he was exhausted but strangely fulfilled. "How was it?" Mark asked when they met at the end of the day. "Hard, but good. Different from anything I've ever done." "Want to come back next week?" "I do." And so began Tyler's transformation. Over the next few weeks, he started coming to the hospital 3 times a week, first just observing, then actively helping. Mrs. Johnson was impressed by the young man's dedication. "Your brother is special," she told Mark. "I've never seen anyone adapt so quickly to a hospital environment." "He just needed a purpose," Mark replied. Meanwhile, Robert William began visiting Mark regularly. They had lunch together once a week, gradually building a real relationship. Mark shared childhood stories, the challenges of medical school and how he met Jennifer. Robert William reminisced about Helen Anderson, admitted past mistakes, and talked about his hopes for the future. After a month of these meetings, Mark made an important decision. I want you to meet Emily, Grace, and Ethan. Are you sure? I am, but let's take it slow. First a casual meeting, then we'll see how they react. The following Sunday, Robert William was invited to lunch at Mark's house. He arrived nervous, carrying simple gifts he had carefully chosen, a storybook for Emily, Grace, and a puzzle for Ethan. "Kids," Mark said when his father arrived, "this is Grandpa Robert." "Grandpa?" Emily Grace asked curiously. "I thought we didn't have a grandpa." "We found out we do," Jennifer explained. "He was lost, but now he's found." Ethan, shyer, hid behind his mother. Emily Grace, more outgoing, approached Robert William. "Are you really our grandpa?" "I am," Robert William replied, kneeling to meet her eye level. "And I'm very happy to meet you." "Why were you lost?" The innocent question touched Robert William's heart. "Because sometimes adults make wrong choices and get lost. But now I've found my way, and I want to get to know my grandchildren." During lunch, Robert William observed the family's dynamic. Mark and Jennifer were loving but firm parents. The children were polite, curious, and bright, exactly the kind of family he wished he'd had. Emily Grace quickly took to her new grandfather. Ethan took longer, but by the end of the afternoon, he was showing Robert William his toys. "Are you going to live with us now?" Ethan asked. "No, sweetheart," Mark explained. "Grandpa has his own home and we have ours, but now we'll visit often." "What about Uncle Tyler?" "You'll meet Uncle Tyler next week." When Robert William left that Sunday, he carried in his heart the certainty that he had regained more than a son. He had gained a real family. The following week, it was Tyler's turn to meet his nephews. He arrived even more nervous than his father, unsure how to act around children. Emily Grace, always straightforward, asked the question everyone was waiting for. "Are you as rich as Grandpa?" Tyler looked at Mark, silently asking for guidance. "I'm richer than you," he answered honestly, "but I've learned that's not what matters most." "What matters more?" Ethan asked. "Having a family who loves each other, and now I have a bigger family with all of you." The children accepted Tyler naturally. To them, suddenly having a grandfather and an uncle was like receiving unexpected gifts. Over the next few weeks, the family got to know each other better. Robert William Anderson visited his grandchildren every Sunday. Tyler continued his volunteer work at the hospital and spent Wednesdays with Mark and the kids. But not everything was perfect. Helen, Robert William's wife, was starting to question her husband's absences. "Where have you been going every Sunday?" she asked one Thursday during dinner. Robert William knew the time had come to tell her the truth. "Helen, there's something important I need to tell you." "I'm listening." "I found out I have another son." Helen dropped her fork onto the plate. "Another son? What do you mean?" "From my first marriage. With Mary Helen." "But Mary Helen wasn't pregnant when you separated." "She was, but I didn't know." Helen stayed silent for several minutes, processing the information. "And now, what does this mean for our family?" "It means Tyler has an older brother, and I have 2 grandchildren I want to get to know better." "2 grandchildren? How old are they?" "Emily Grace is 12, Ethan is 8. Helen got up from the table and walked to the window. 40 years of marriage, Robert. 40 years thinking I knew my husband completely." "You do know me, Helen. This doesn't change who I am." "Yes, it does. It changes things because it means you had a great love before me. A love that still affects you after all these years." Helen's observation was sharp. Robert William did still feel something for Mary Helen, even after her passing. "Helen, our marriage was based on convenience from the start. We both knew that. Knowing is one thing. Having it thrown in my face is another. What do you want me to do? Abandon my son again?" Helen took her time answering. "No, but I want to meet him. If he's going to be part of our family, I want to be part of his life too." Helen's proposal surprised Robert William. He had expected resistance, not interest. "Are you sure?" "I am. And Tyler. How is he handling all this?" "Better than I expected. He's been volunteering at the hospital where Mark works." "Tyler? Volunteering?" Helen couldn't hide her surprise. "Seems like having a brother is good for him." Helen spent the night thinking about the new situation. The next morning, she made a decision. "Robert, I want to meet Mark and his family." "Are you sure? It might be awkward for everyone." "I'll have to face it sooner or later. I'd rather it be sooner." Robert William called Mark and explained the situation. "She wants to meet you. I'm not sure it's a good idea." "Why wouldn't it be?" "Because it might be strange. Your father's current wife meeting his ex-wife's family." Mark thought for a few minutes. "Actually, I think it could be good. Emily, Grace, and Ethan will need to understand the whole family eventually." "So you're okay with it?" "We are. But let's make it somewhere neutral. How about a restaurant?" The following Saturday, the two families met at a middle-class restaurant in Greenwich Village. Helen arrived nervous, unsure what to expect. Mark greeted her politely. Jennifer was kind but cautious. The kids, as always, were direct. "Are you Grandma Helen?" Emily Grace asked. Helen looked at Robert William, unsure how to respond. "If you'd like, I can be," she finally answered. "Awesome. Now we have two grandpas," Ethan cheered. During lunch, Helen carefully observed Mark's family. She was impressed by the children's manners, Jennifer's simplicity, and Mark's intelligence. "Have you been a doctor for long?" she asked Mark. 15 years. I've always worked in the public sector." "Why? Wouldn't it be more profitable to work at private hospitals?" "It would, but I like helping those who need it most." Helen looked at her stepson with newfound admiration. It was rare to find someone who chose purpose over profit. "And you, Jennifer? Do you work outside the home?" "I used to work as a nurse, but I stopped when Ethan was born with health issues. Now I take care of the house and help Mark with his schedule. It must be hard living only on a public sector doctor's salary." Jennifer and Mark exchanged glances. The question touched a sensitive subject. "It's challenging sometimes," Mark admitted, "but we manage." Helen realized she'd struck a nerve and changed the subject. "Emily Grace, do you know what you want to be when you grow up?" "I want to be a doctor like Daddy," the girl answered without hesitation. "And Ethan?" "He wants to be a soccer player," Mark laughed, "but he's got time to change his mind." During dessert, Helen asked a question that surprised everyone. "Mark, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Do you resent me for marrying your father after your mother passed?" Mark thought carefully before answering. "At first, when I learned the story, I did. But then I understood you were also a victim of circumstances. My father made his choices, and you built a life from them. Thank you for understanding. But can I ask you something too?" "Of course." "Are you happy in your marriage?" The question caught Helen off guard. She glanced at Robert William before answering. "We're comfortable. We've built a stable life together. But are you happy?" Helen took her time responding. "Happy is a complicated word. We're content." Mark nodded, understanding the difference between contentment and true happiness. When they said goodbye, Helen hugged the children and was surprised by how easily they accepted her. "You can visit us too," Emily Grace said. "Our house is small, but there's room for you." The innocent invitation touched Helen deeply. On the way home, Robert William asked, "What did you think of them?" "They're a beautiful family. Mark is impressive, Jennifer is strong, the children are delightful. And now? Now I understand why you want to be part of their lives." Over the following months, the extended family found its rhythm. Helen began visiting Mark and the children regularly, developing a special fondness for Emily Grace, who reminded her of her own determined childhood. Tyler continued his volunteer work and discovered a calling to help others. He began studying hospital administration, thinking about how he could contribute to improving the healthcare system. Robert William, for the first time in decades, felt complete. He had 2 sons he admired, a caring daughter-in-law, and 2 grandchildren who brightened his Sundays. But life, as always, had new surprises in store. One Thursday in September, John called Robert William with urgency in his voice. "Dr. Robert, I need to speak with you. It's important." "What happened, John?" "I can't say over the phone. Can you come to my place?" Robert William found John in his modest home on the city outskirts. The man who'd worked as a janitor in his mansion for months seemed troubled. "John, what's going on?" "It's about Mark. He's hiding something serious from you." Robert Williams' heart raced. What do you mean? Ethan is sick, very sick. The heart murmur I mentioned wasn't as simple as it seemed. What do you mean? The boy needs a complex heart surgery, the kind that isn't done in the public system because it's too expensive. Why didn't Mark tell us? Because he's proud, and because you all set that rule about not accepting financial help. Robert William Anderson felt a mix of anger and desperation. How much does this surgery cost? About $200,000, plus tests, hospitalization, medication. That's nothing to me. Why didn't he ask for help? Because it's not just about money, Dr. Robert. It's about dignity. Mark doesn't want you to think he got close to the family out of self-interest. That's ridiculous. Ethan is my grandson. I know, but Mark doesn't want to seem like he's taking advantage of the situation. Robert ran his hand through his hair, frustrated. What can we do? Convince Mark that accepting help from family isn't a sign of weakness. How? I don't know, but it has to be quick. The surgery should have been done 2 months ago. The longer we wait, the riskier it gets. Robert left John's house more determined than ever. He wouldn't let his son's pride put his grandson's life at risk. The next morning, he went straight to the hospital to find Mark. We need to talk now. Dad, I'm in the middle of a surgery. Finish it and come find me. It's about Ethan. Mark's face paled. How did you find out? John told me. Why didn't you tell me Ethan needs surgery? Mark glanced around, checking if anyone could hear them. Let's talk in my office. Once inside, Mark closed the door and turned to his father. I said I didn't want your money. That was before I knew my grandson was in danger. Ethan isn't in immediate danger. We can wait for a spot in the public system. Wait how long? 6 months? A year? What if there's no spot? There will be. And if there isn't, will you let your son take risks because of your pride? The words hit Mark like a punch. He sank heavily into his chair. It's not about pride. It's about what? It's about not wanting you to think I got close to the family for money. Mark, you're a doctor. You know Ethan's health can't wait forever. I know, but no buts. Ethan is my grandson. Let me help. Mark stayed silent for several minutes. Robert could see the internal struggle. How much? He finally asked. $200,000 for the surgery. Another $50,000 for tests and recovery. Robert breathed a sigh of relief. The amount was significant for Mark, but almost nothing to him. When can we schedule the surgery? Dad, I didn't say I'd accept. Mark, stop this. Your son needs help. I can help. End of discussion. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. Just then, Tyler appeared at the office door. Dad? Mark? What's going on? Ethan needs heart surgery, Robert explained. Ethan? Tyler turned pale. Is it serious? It could be if not treated soon, Mark replied. Then let's treat him. What's the problem? Mark doesn't want to accept our financial help, Robert said. Tyler stared at his brother in disbelief. You're joking, right? We're talking about Ethan's life. I'm not joking. I have my principles. Principles? Tyler raised his voice. Mark, Ethan is our nephew, our family. Would you let an 8-year-old take risks over principles? You don't understand. No, you're the one who doesn't understand, Tyler interrupted. This is what family is. Being there when someone needs you. Using what we have to protect the people we love. Mark looked at his younger brother, surprised by the maturity in his words. What if you think I only got close to you out of self-interest? Mark said. Tyler, sitting beside his brother, replied, You spent 40 years without knowing we had money. If you wanted to take advantage of someone, you would have found a way before now. Robert William Anderson watched the conversation between his sons with pride. Tyler had matured a lot in recent months. Besides, Tyler continued, you're a doctor. You save lives every day. If there was a child in your hospital who needed this surgery and someone offered to pay for it, would you refuse out of pride? Of course not. Then why is it different when the child is your own? The question hit Mark hard. Tyler was right. He would never let a child be at risk over money. All right, he finally said. I'll accept the help. Robert felt immense relief. When can we schedule the surgery? I'll call Dr. Richard Bennett. He's the best pediatric heart surgeon in the city. If you can pay privately, he can operate on Ethan next week. Call him now, Robert said. While Mark made the necessary calls, Tyler and his father talked outside the office. Thank you, Robert said. For what? For making Mark see the obvious. You were more convincing than I was. It's because I understand him. For years I lived in a bubble, not knowing the real value of things. Now I see that family is more important than pride. When did you get so wise? Tyler smiled. When I found out I had a brother who taught me what purpose in life really means. Mark returned with good news. Dr. Richard can operate on Ethan on Thursday. He'll use a minimally invasive technique that shortens recovery time. Perfect. What do we need to do? Nothing. I'll handle everything. Just thank you. Don't thank me. That's what family does. That night, Mark came home and told Jennifer about the decision. Are you sure? She asked. I am. Tyler made me see I was putting my pride before Ethan's health. How do we tell the kids? We'll tell them the truth, that Ethan needs surgery, that his grandfather and uncle will help, and that after a few days, he'll feel even better than before. Emily Grace and Ethan took the news with the ease only children have. Will it hurt? Ethan asked. Just a little at first, Mark explained, but then you'll be able to run and play without getting tired, like you always wanted. And Grandpa's paying? Emily Grace asked. Yes, because that's what families do. They take care of each other. On Thursday, the whole family was at the private hospital waiting for Ethan's surgery. Robert, Helen, Tyler, Mark, Jennifer, Emily Grace, and even John, who had taken time off work to be there. The surgery lasted 4 hours. Dr. Richard Bennett was truly skilled, but the wait felt endless. When he finally came out, the doctor had good news. The surgery went perfectly. Ethan will make a full recovery. In a month, he can return to normal activities. Relief washed over everyone. Jennifer cried happy tears. Mark hugged his father for the first time since they'd met. And Emily Grace asked when she could see her brother. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps us as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. During Ethan's recovery in the hospital, the family spent a lot of time together. Robert discovered he loved reading stories to his grandson. Helen taught Emily Grace how to knit, and Tyler invented games Ethan could play in bed. Mark watched it all with emotion. For the first time in his life, he felt part of a big, close-knit family. A week after the surgery, Ethan was discharged. He was doing well, happy, eager to return home. Grandpa, said Ethan on the day of his discharge, thank you for helping me. No need to thank me, my dear. That's what grandfathers do. And will you keep visiting us? Always. You won't be able to get rid of me. Ethan laughed, and that sound was the greatest reward Robert William Anderson could have received. In the following months, the family continued to grow closer. Tyler had found his calling in healthcare and decided to pursue a second degree in hospital administration. His goal was to help improve the public healthcare system. Helen developed a special fondness for Emily Grace and began helping her with her studies. The girl truly had the potential to become a doctor like her father. Robert visited his grandchildren twice a week and discovered these were the happiest moments of his life. Ethan fully recovered from his surgery and could now play without limitations. Mark began accepting the family's help more easily, understanding it didn't diminish his dignity. When Emily Grace needed special school supplies, he didn't hesitate to let Helen buy them. When Ethan wanted to take soccer lessons, he allowed Tyler to pay for them. A year after their first meeting, the family decided to celebrate. They chose a special restaurant where they could talk comfortably. "A year ago," said Robert, raising his glass, "I thought I had a family. Today I know I have a family." "And I thought I only had a spoiled brother," Mark joked. "Today I know I have a brother and a best friend." "And I thought money was the most important thing," said Tyler. "Today I know family is the most important." Helen, who had become a loving and present grandmother, made her own toast. "A year ago, I had a marriage of convenience. Today, I have a family I truly love." Jennifer, who had initially been wary of getting close to the wealthy family, surprised everyone. "A year ago, I was afraid you'd change our simple life. Today, I know you've made our life complete." Emily Grace, ever sharp, made her own observation. "A year ago, we only had Dad and Mom. Now we have Grandpa, Grandma Helen, Uncle Tyler, and Uncle John, who was always here. Our family got huge." Ethan, pragmatic like any 8-year-old, summed it up simply. "Now I have lots of people to give me birthday presents." Everyone laughed, but it was a laugh of genuine happiness. John, who had been the catalyst for this family reunion, watched the scene with satisfaction. "Mary Helen would be proud," he murmured to himself. Robert overheard and approached his brother-in-law. "John, I'll never be able to thank you enough for what you've done. I just kept a promise to my sister. You did much more than that. You gave us a family. The family already existed. I just helped you find each other." After dinner, as they said goodbye in the parking lot, Mark made a suggestion. "Dad, how about we all spend Christmas together? At our place? Are you sure? There are so many of us." "We're sure," Jennifer replied. "It'll be tight, but it'll be ours." Helen offered to help with the feast. Tyler suggested buying a big tree, and Emily Grace was already planning gifts. Robert looked at his family, all of it, and felt immense gratitude for the fate that had brought John into his life. That Christmas, in Mark and Jennifer's small but cozy home, 3 generations of the Anderson family gathered to celebrate not just the holiday, but the second chance life had given them all. Robert, watching Ethan play with his gift, remembered the letter Mary Helen had written 40 years earlier. She had been right. Mark wasn't to blame for his parents' mistakes. And now, at last, the whole family was united. John watched the scene from the couch, tired but happy. At 68, he knew he had fulfilled his mission. Mary Helen could rest in peace. Her son had found not just a father, but a complete family. Tyler, who just a year earlier had been merely a purposeless rich kid, now had concrete plans for the future. He wanted to use the family's resources to improve the healthcare system, inspired by his brother's work. Helen discovered she could be more than just a dutiful wife. She could be a beloved grandmother and a second mother to Emily Grace. Jennifer learned that accepting help doesn't diminish a family's dignity, as long as it's offered with genuine love. Emily Grace and Ethan simply gained more people to love and be loved by. And Mark. Mark finally understood that having a father didn't lessen the love he felt for his mother. He could honor Mary Helen's memory while still building a relationship with Robert William. When the children went to bed that Christmas night, Robert William stayed behind to help Mark tidy up the house. "Son," he said, using the word that now came naturally, "thank you." "For what?" "For giving me a second chance to be a father, and for letting me be a grandfather to your children. Thank you for not giving up when I was difficult at first. You had every right to be difficult. I should have looked for you sooner. Maybe things happened at the right time. If you had shown up when I was a child or a teenager, maybe I wouldn't have been able to forgive you. And now you have?" Mark smiled. "Now I understand that we all make mistakes and deserve second chances. You, me, all of us." When Robert William returned home in the early hours of the morning, he found a letter on his nightstand. It was from Helen. "Robert, I wanted you to know that I've never felt as fulfilled in our marriage as I do now. Mark taught me that family isn't just about blood, it's about choice, and I choose to be part of this beautiful family you've built. Thank you for including me in this second chance at happiness. With love, Helen." Robert William tucked the letter away tenderly. For the first time in 40 years, he felt his life was complete. The following year, Tyler graduated with a degree in hospital administration and presented a project to create an improvement program for the city's public hospitals. Robert William decided to support the project, not just financially, but as an active partner. Mark was invited to oversee the medical side of the initiative. For the first time, father and sons would work together on something meaningful. Helen created a support program for families of hospitalized patients, inspired by the stories Jennifer shared about the struggles they faced when Ethan was sick. Emily Grace, now 13, already talked about following in her father's footsteps into medicine. Ethan, fully recovered, was the most active boy in school. John continued working at the Anderson household, but now by choice, not necessity. Robert William had offered his brother-in-law a lifetime pension, but John preferred to stay active. After so long planning this family reunion, John said, "I'm not going to stop being part of it now." On a Sunday afternoon, 2 years after their first meeting, the whole family gathered in Mark's backyard for Ethan's birthday. The boy turned 10, healthy, happy, and surrounded by love. Robert William took in the scene. Helen teaching Emily Grace how to bake a cake, Tyler playing soccer with Ethan, Mark and Jennifer setting up for the party, John sharing stories about when Mark was little. "What are you thinking about?" Mark asked, walking over to his father. "I'm thinking John was right. Your mother would be proud to see this family." "She would. And you know what else? I think she'd forgive you for the mistakes of the past, seeing how hard you're trying to make up for them now." "You think so?" "I do. My mother always said that what matters isn't how we start, but how we finish. And we're finishing this story well." Robert William Anderson hugged his son, feeling a peace he hadn't known in decades. At that moment, Ethan came running with a soccer ball. "Grandpa, come play with us. Uncle Tyler needs help." Robert laughed and ran after his grandson, forgetting for a few minutes that he was a 70-year-old millionaire businessman. He was just a grandpa playing with his beloved grandson. Helen watched from the kitchen window and smiled. She'd discovered that happiness wasn't in the fancy social events she attended, but in these simple moments with family. Jennifer finished decorating the cake and called everyone to sing happy birthday. When Ethan blew out the candles, he closed his eyes and made a wish. "What did you wish for?" asked Emily Grace. "That our family would always stay together like this." "It will," promised Robert. "Forever." And as everyone sang happy birthday to Ethan, each reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them there. A journey that began with secrets and hurt, but ended with love and forgiveness. 3 years had passed, and the Anderson family had become an example in the community. Tyler and Mark's hospital project was nationally recognized as a model for public-private partnerships. Emily Grace, now 16, was already interning at the hospital where her father worked, showing a natural aptitude for medicine. Ethan, at 13, still dreamed of being a soccer player, but also showed interest in social work, inspired by his family's efforts. Helen had become something of a family matriarch, organizing Sunday gatherings where everyone came for lunch and caught up. Robert, now 75, had learned to balance work and family. His businesses remained prosperous, but he now knew true success lay in the relationships he'd built. Mark had been promoted to head of the cardiology department, but still treated underprivileged patients with the same dedication as always. Tyler had married a colleague in healthcare and was expecting his first child, who would be Robert's first great-grandchild. John, now officially retired, spent his days tending a small garden at the Anderson house and telling neighborhood children stories about the importance of family. One May afternoon, on the 5th anniversary of their reunion, the family gathered at the same restaurant where everything had begun to change. But this time, there was a special addition, a framed photo of Mary Helen, which John had brought. "I'd like to make a toast," said John, standing with some difficulty. At 73, he felt the weight of age, but his eyes still sparkled with happiness. "Mary Helen always believed family isn't just who you're born with, but who you choose to stay with. Today, looking at all of you, I know she was right. You chose to be family, and that's the most beautiful thing there is." Robert stood and embraced his brother-in-law. "John, you kept your promise. Mary Helen can rest in peace knowing our family is united." "The promise was just to tell the truth," said John. "Your love did the rest." Emily Grace, now a determined young woman, made her own declaration. "When I become a doctor, I want to work with underprivileged people like Dad does. But I also want to use the family's resources to help more people, like Uncle Tyler does. And I want to be a soccer player," said Ethan, making everyone laugh, "but a player who helps poor kids go to school." Helen, who had transformed from a dutiful wife into a beloved grandmother, expressed her gratitude. 5 years ago, I had a comfortable but empty life. Today, I have a family that taught me it's never too late to truly love." Jennifer, always the voice of reason in the family, made an important observation. "The most beautiful part of our story is that each of us became a better person by being here. It wasn't just about finding family, it was about growing together. Tyler, who had transformed from a wealthy playboy into a dedicated hospital administrator, agreed. When Mark came into our lives, I thought I was gaining a brother. In truth, I was gaining a purpose. Mark, who had resisted closeness for so long, shared his own reflection. For 40 years I thought my family was just me, Jennifer, and the kids. Today I know that family can grow at any time, at any age. You just have to be open to love. Robert William, who had begun this whole journey as a wealthy but emotionally poor man, summed up his feelings. You gave me the chance to be not just a better father, but a better man. At 75, I've learned it's never too late to start over. When they left the restaurant that night, they walked together down the sidewalk, 3 generations of a family that had found each other through a mix of fate, courage, and love. John watched them all chatting animatedly and smiled. His mission was complete, but his family was just beginning to write a new story. Robert Williams scooped Ethan into his arms, even though the boy was too big for it now. Emily Grace walked beside Helen, planning the future. Tyler and Mark discussed new projects for the hospital. Jennifer talked with John about old recipes he'd learned from Mary Helen. It was an imperfect family, formed by choice as much as by blood, bound by forgiveness as much as by love. It was exactly the kind of family Mary Helen had dreamed of for her son. And so, as they walked together under the city lights, each one knew they had found something precious, a second chance at happiness, an opportunity to love without reservation, a family that chose to stay together despite all the challenges. The story that began with buried secrets had become a lesson about the transformative power of forgiveness and the courage to give second chances. John looked up at the starry sky and whispered one last promise to his sister. Mission accomplished, Mary Helen. Our family is finally complete. End of story. And you, what did you think of this family reunion story? Could you imagine finding a father or child after so many years? Tell us in the comments which moment moved you the most. If you have a special family story to share, we'd love to hear it. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories.